but we'll do the first bit as delivery and then we'll have questions. The questions can be in the chat or you can use the raise hand function and can ask that question. We're very happy to have that dialogue. If there are questions that people ask that we don't know the answers to or that we need to find out more, then we'll go away and we'll do that. And what we'll produce afterwards is a question and answer document that we'll send out to your email addresses in the same place that you received this link for the session. And hopefully that will bring together all of the information, both the presented information, but then also that conversation, that dialogue about early conversations, and so that you and a wider group of parent carers and families can benefit from that information. That's really helpful. So we've got several colleagues here. Ellie, could you pop the slides up and I'll just pop through the first couple. Obviously these things always take moments longer than you like. Thank you, it's coming through now. So I'll introduce my colleagues. I think we just click through. So that's just the instructions around how to use the hand up function. It's at the top bar where it's got a little hand and a face. You can click that and use that. We want to be able to get feedback. We know that the best way to learn is through that kind of hearing from people who've experienced, you know, what we're doing. So we've got a feedback form. When Ellie's got a second, she'll drop it in the chat for us. If you want to open that and fill it out as you go, and that is absolutely fine. You can do that or complete it after the session. We really do value the thoughts, the opinions, the suggestions that people make. So I've said we'll circulate the question answers after the session. So the speakers today, we've got Elaine Lamb from Warwickshire Parent Carer Voice. There we go, she's waving. We've got Tammy Mason, who's from the Specialist Teacher Service, and MTAS, and Tammy will do a lot of the delivery today. We've also got one of our colleagues from Health. We've got Dr. Hannah Packman, who's a GP, and then myself, and Elaine Harvey and Matt Bown, and also we've got Sarah Foster here as well from the Health Visiting Service. So and Sarah, I apologise, you've dropped off our list of speakers, but Elaine and Matt and Sarah are here, and if they can contribute to any of those question and answer sessions at the end, then we'll benefit from that. But we're going to have further sessions with SENDIAS and with the Health Visiting Service, because we think that we need more time to be able to give that justice. So I'll hand over now to the first of our speakers. If you go on to the first slide, and our outcomes, we want to be able to raise those questions early on, and to ensure that actually you guys know where to go and who to speak to and what is helpful to progress things. I think we made that out previously. So I'll hand over to Tammy. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here today. So we've spent quite a lot of time planning today's webinar, and I'll be very honest, we started off with a lot more content than we've ended up with. I think we all got quite excited putting this together and realised how many different avenues this can branch off into. So I think that the starting point I want to make today is this is very much an overview of those very initial conversations, those very initial concerns that you might have. And as Sam's already mentioned, we will be picking up again with Sarah in Health Visiting and with Elaine from SENDIAS to go into further detail. Also, if there's anything else that you feel at the end of this, you know, you'd like more information about, you feel, well, you know, we've had to rush through, again, let Sam know, you know, put it on the feedback form, and we'll make sure that we put greater detail in a future session for you. So, reasons for early conversations, and again, as I started brainstorming this, it became very apparent that depending on you, depending on your child, depending on the circumstances, these could really be about anything. It's about any concerns that you might be having. So this absolutely isn't an exhaustive list, but hopefully I've captured the more common ones. So it's perfectly normal, perfectly understandable that you may be having a concern about one of these things. So a child's cognition and learning, how they're doing academically, are they making enough progress? Do you think they're struggling? And again, often you, as parents, you're the expert in your child, and very often as parents we'll pick up on things at home that our children will mask in school. They'll tell the teachers, everything's fine, I understand this. So it's really helpful that as parents you give that information. Are there problems with relationships, with friendships that the school may not be aware of? Are you concerned about emotional well-being, speech and language development, physical development? Maybe a child's balance, maybe their sort of bigger motor skills, their big movements, or their small motor skills, that their handwriting, their ability to do fiddly tasks. Are you picking up that your child's coming home particularly tired, or are you worried about their attention, their concentration? Attendance worries. Are the things that is your child regularly saying they're not feeling very well, or coming up with reasons why they can't go to school that maybe you're thinking doesn't quite ring true? And are they struggling with transitions? And we know that we've got the big transitions going from, one class to another at the end of a school year. But there can be other things that are difficult for some children. Just starting the day, for instance, saying goodbye to you and going into school. So those are a few examples. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Ellie? Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Elaine from Parent Carer Voice to talk through this.
Hello. So we as parents want to kind of just feel it's important to recognise the emotional journey that families are going through when these early conversations happen. So it may be that you've identified the difficulties your child has had and have taken this to somebody else and asking them to listen. It may be that you've recognised the difficulties and have finally got somebody else recognising them too. You might be struggling with the idea that your child has SEND needs. You might be angry that no one's recognised their needs, or anxious and fearful for the future. And you may be struggling with the uncertainty of what next. This roller coaster of emotions you're feeling is normal. Take your time to process this and be kind to yourself as you start your journey as a parent carer. And the journey is unlikely to be short, and you, your child, and the people who support them in health or education will constantly be learning about their needs and how best to support them and to support you. Unfortunately, the system is often slow, so you're unlikely to get quick answers. Don't expect to be an expert in SEND right now because it's enormous. So our top tips to get started is to have a notebook and record every meeting, every discussion, every observation, something your child says, does, write it down, because at some point you might want to find it again. And if you've got it in one place, in one notebook, it's easy. Again, get a folder because you're going to get lots of paperwork. And so it's easier just to have one folder that you can slot it all into and keep it all in there. Build your support network. Your family and friends may struggle to understand what's going on for you. So the networks of SEND support groups, other parents, carers will be maybe invaluable to help you through your journey. And join Warwickshire Parent Carer Voice. I'll put the link in the chat later. This means that the more parents we have in our network, the more experiences we have to share to help improve the services to support you better. And we also have a feedback form so that you can share things that are making you happy, sad or mad, whenever it happens, so that we can then share the good practice and try and improve the things that aren't going so well. And the next slide. So finally, just remember that when you're feeling overwhelmed, because there will be times when you are feeling totally overwhelmed by the whole process, take each step at a time and just focus on that next step.
Thank you for that, Elaine. And now we're going, trying to get the camera on, we're going to hand over to Hannah, who will start to give you some feedback from a GP perspective. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, thank you for inviting me here today. I think it's a very difficult circumstance to be in, and a lot of parents feel very overwhelmed over where to go for support. And it's really important to know that your GP can help you with that. We are one avenue of kind of supporting you through that process. Often patients, and parents come to a meeting with us, and I think they don't know what to expect, and perhaps we're not always clear about what would be useful in that scenario. So I thought it'd be quite useful just to kind of talk about what may or may not happen. So the first thing is, don't be surprised if the GP wants to see your child. Now, sometimes that won't be appropriate. Sometimes that might cause the child extreme stress, and it might just not be appropriate, and they might not be able to handle the scenario of coming into the surgery. And we won't force a child to come in under those circumstances. But as Tammy said, there can be so many different reasons for a child having problems that sometimes it's really useful to see the child. Actually, is there a health reason? Do we need to do bloods for tiredness? Is there an eating disorder or something that actually we need to dig a little bit deeper in? Because a lot of the issues that parents come and talk to us about are not just one thing. They're often complex. There may be many parts that's, leading to anxiety, or, so often it's not an isolated thing, and it's quite useful sometimes for us to unpick that either over the phone or in person with the child. Sometimes directly with the child, sometimes actually with an older child, we might say, actually, do you want to chat to us on your own? You might not want your parents there. So that, just to give you that oversight that we might want to have that chat. The second thing really is to say that documents are really useful in this scenario. Parents often come in with this big blurb of information that they're desperate to share, and they don't really know how to share, and it's quite difficult to unpick on our side because we don't know your child. You know your child, absolutely, but we don't know them often very well. Sometimes we might have seen them for just an ear infection when they were younger, and that's it. So if you can bring in related documents, as the guys have said, that really helps the process. And trying to think through, well, what are the issues that you're aware of, and have a list that you can say, well, there's this thing and here's some examples. It really helps kind of gives us a better picture of what's going on, because we're not going to say yes or no, this isn't happening. You're telling us it's happening. We just need that evidence to then we can take that forward. Can we have the next slide, please? So, as I've said, you know your child best, so we are going to try and be led by you and your concerns. Now, the people who know your child probably next best is going to be the school, and therefore we will often signpost you back to the school, and that's not us trying to just pass you on or not care. Actually, it's because they are best placed to access the support that you often need. There are so many people that can be accessed through the schools, OTs, educational psychologists, specialist teachers, all of those people who can put things into place. There are resources that are available for you guys to have access to, and we will often signpost you to those as well. The Dimensions Toolkit, I'm sure a lot of you have been signposted to, using RISE, the CAMS kind of website. There's support with school attendance and emotional-based school avoidance. There's leaflets on the RISE website about that, which may be helpful for you. We're very aware that CAMS waiting lists are huge and are overwhelmed, and a lot of people will say, oh, can we have a supporting letter? We can't wait this long. School need a diagnosis. We need to move forward. And I would really reinforce that it's really important to recognise that we can't make a diagnosis, but actually that doesn't mean that the support cannot be accessed because you don't have a diagnosis. And it's often going to be a really long process, as has been said before. So don't feel that you can't have that support along the way. The diagnosis helps at the end, but it shouldn't stop you accessing that support. I can see a hand up. I don't know if we want to deal with that now or if we're going to deal with stuff at the end.
We'll do questions at the end, Hannah, because then it will maintains people confidentiality for the recording that'll be on the website. Okay.
Excellent. So I'll hand over to the next person.
Thank you, Hannah. It's back to me, and actually I really want to reiterate the last point that Hannah was making there. So I don't think I explained it at the start. My role is I manage specialist teaching service, and well the specialist teaching service in the southern area, and you know, I want to sort of reassure parents and carers really that over the last few years, we've been working really hard in the way that we structure our services and in the support that we provide, to ensure that a diagnosis or the lack of it isn't going to have a negative impact on the support your child's receiving. So for instance, you know, about 3 or 4 years ago now, we restructured the way we deliver autism support in schools. Because previously we had a very small team that could only respond once a diagnosis was in place. So, you know, don't worry that you're convinced your child or young person needs a diagnosis and they haven't got one yet. We completely understand the delays in the processes. So moving on to accessing support at school, and again, I understand, you know, as a parent myself, it can be really, really difficult sometimes to know whether you go to the GP or whether you go to the school with the problem. And I think that the simplest answer is really, don't worry about getting it wrong. Because if it's something that you need a medical referral for and you go to school will tell you, really sorry, we can't deal with this, but you know, it's something your GP will support, and vice versa. I mean, in the sort of crudest sense, anything that is likely to need a medical professional to investigate the problem further, GP is a good rule of thumb for that. Anything that you're likely to need somebody to do some more detailed assessments of learning, for instance, of emotional well-being, often school is the starting point for that. But there are blurred lines, and so try not to worry, you know, about getting it wrong. So in terms of who you go to, who you speak to, what we would always advise is first and foremost, CENDIAS, they are going to do a presentation in the future all about the services they offer. But CENDIAS have got lots of information and advice available about what schools should be doing and when they should be doing it. So first and foremost, if you've got any concerns that you feel school aren't picking up on this, or I've told them about a concern and they're not doing the right thing, then CENDIAS is a really good starting point. But the general rule of thumb is, if you've got a concern about your child, in the first instance, speak to, if it's a primary school, the class teacher, and if it's a secondary school, then either if it's a specific problem around a particular subject, then speak to the subject teacher. If it's about a range of subjects, then speak to the child's form tutor. And if it's more about the child's relationships, their emotional well-being, then speak to whoever the pastoral lead is. That could be a head of house or a head of year. Your information should be on the school website, and I'll come on to that in a minute. They're always the best person to speak to in the first instance, because they'll have the most detailed knowledge of how your child is doing with that particular thing. Oh, sorry, could we pop back a bit? We seem to have, lovely, thank you. If you're not getting the response you need, if you're not getting the support you're requiring, then the next person to speak to would be the SENDCO, might be called the inclusion manager, special needs coordinator. And often, if you have spoken to the class teacher first and there is cause for concern, then they may well speak to the SENCO anyway. And then the third step would be where myself, specialist teacher, or an educational psychologist may become involved. So once the class teacher and the SENCO are both concerned and they've tried to put things in place that are making a difference, then it may be that they need to refer on to us. So if we could go on to the next one now, please. Thank you. So these are different teams that may end up being involved to support your child. All of these referrals could come from the school. And again, as I said at the start, this isn't an exhaustive list. So different outside agencies, we've got educational psychologists, we've got specialist teachers, so we've got something called the Integrated Disability Service. They often deal with physical needs and very young children. Specialist teaching service, so we deal with a range of needs from learning needs to autism and social communication needs to challenges around emotional well-being. The flexible learning team, they can support children who are unable to attend school because of a medical and emotional reason. Occupational therapy, so they sit within health but are referred to by schools. Speech and language therapy, likewise. Significant adults, they're a group of specialists that work with schools when children are facing problems that may put them at risk of exclusion. So if you hear that term bandied about. And then we've also got the Ethnic Minority and Traveller Achievement Service, so they can deal with children newly arrived from different countries who are experiencing language problems, and traveller children who may move schools quite a lot or may have missed chunks of their education. Okay, thanks, Ellie. Mentioned the school website earlier. If you really don't know which way to go, your school website should be a really good starting point for you. There are various things that legally school websites should include, and they've often got lots of additional information as well. In terms of having a concern about your child, worrying about where to go, the school website has to have something called a send information report, and I'm going to talk in a bit more detail about those in the coming slides. That really should tell you what your school offers, who you go to, how the support is accessed. They'll have a send policy, but to be honest with you, you'll probably find the information report the most helpful. There'll be a behaviour policy on there. So again, if you feel that your child is getting into trouble or maybe fairly unfairly, you can have a look at what the school does and the processes they've got in place. There'll also be an accessibility policy and plan. Links to the local offer. So I know that Matt Bowen has just mentioned in the chat that Warwickshire County Council has got a local offer, so it's web pages that really show the support that's available across Warwickshire and how it can be accessed. There should also be on the school website a link to something called the Dimensions tool, which I think has also gone into the chat. So that's part of RISE of the CAM service, and again it's a tool that you can use that you can answer questions and it will signpost you towards appropriate support. And also the neurodevelopmental pathway e-booklet, so that's particularly around that diagnosis pathways around autism, for instance. Okay, next slide, thank you. So the send information report, and mindful of time, want plenty of time for you to ask questions. I won't go through this in detail, but your send information report is a really good starting point. It will tell you who the SENCO is if you need to speak to the SENCO. It will tell you what the school already offers, what training class teachers have had, what different interventions they're offered and how they can be accessed. It can tell you which outside agencies they routinely work with, for instance, educational psychologists. So you can start to see from there what's available. So it might be your child's come home and you think, I wasn't concerned, and suddenly I'm hearing my child's accessing this group or that intervention. Again, your send information report will give you a bit more information and tell you who you can have a chat to. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Again, won't read through all of these now, but I've just been trying to sum up some of the things you'd find in your send information report. You will receive a copy of these slides afterwards. So again, it's always worth first concern, have a look at these slides and it'll tell you if you might find the information on your information report. And carrying on, please. what I've included here are 2 different slides that they're both from Warwickshire schools, and it's just to reassure you that SEND information reports can look very different depending on the school. So this one's from Lapworth Primary in the south of the county. And then the next one we've got is a screenshot from Brook Special School. I have to say the Brook one is particularly nice, it's particularly accessible, but ultimately they contain the same information. So don't worry if you go to have a look at your SEN information report and it looks a bit different from some of these slides that we're sharing, it should still have the same information. Okay, carrying on, please. And then, gosh, that's very good timing. What I've put at the end of this slide pack is some links that you'll be able to click on when you receive these slides to different sources of information. So we've got the SEND local offer pages there. So you should find this on your school website, the link, but this isn't just about what's on offer at your school. It's about what's on offer more broadly across health, education and social care too. Okay, and the next slide, another great source of information is the Family Information Service. Really, really knowledgeable team, again, often a really good starting point, but they can also give you lots of information about things happening outside of schools, different groups, support networks that you can access. Okay, the next one, please. SENDIAS, so known as Kids in Warwickshire, and again we have got Elaine from SENDIAS on the call, so she'll be able to answer any general questions today, but we are going to, she could have filled the whole of this time just talking about what they offer. So we've got SENDIAS, and the next one, the Dimensions tool that I referred to. This is really, really helpful if you're worried about a child's emotional well-being, if you're concerned your child maybe is on the autism spectrum, you know, if you've got worries about how your child is interacting and friendships with others, the Dimensions tool is really, really helpful. And it can be accessed by young people, children. It can be accessed by professionals, it can be accessed by class teachers, and it can be accessed by parents as well. It's a series of questions that you can answer. It'll sometimes signpost you towards information leaflets and things that can help you at the end. It may say that actually, you know, speaking to your GP and having, or your school, and having a referral made into the RISE team would be appropriate, but it can be really useful. And the information that you put into this questionnaire, again, if you are referred on further, you know, you can use this information as part of that too. Thank you. And then I'm going to hand over to Sam, back over to
I'm doing
Sam
a little plug
for this last part. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. So the other thing, one of the things that we've done working together with Warwickshire Parent Carer Voice and colleagues across SEND services is develop a live feedback form, so that the experiences that families, children, young people and families, parent carers are having of SEND services in Warwickshire, we want to be able to hear about that, understand what those experiences are like, and to kind of draw that together into a collective voice, so that we can ensure that those voices and those experiences actually feed into the development of services. So I've included the link there so that you have access to that, and tell your friends about it. We want to hear from as many people as possible. Elaine's smiling because I never stop talking about the live feedback form. I think what we'll do is we'll stop the recording there, because we can then have a more open conversation. So we'll just wait a moment whilst that stops.